Hey everyone, it's Scott. We're back for another episode of Strength and Health TV. In this episode, we're going to talk about that nasty V word. We're going to talk about the vegan diet. I've been a vegan for a little over 2.5 years now, and I switched to a vegetarian diet about 5.5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, something like that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my transition into a plant-based diet and talk about some of the different, kind of myths and misconceptions and stuff that I've come across, as well as the results that I've experienced from a health standpoint and some of the other things that I've done, project-wise with plant-based nutrition and some different projects that I've worked on with people. So the main reason that I switched to a plant-based diet was mainly an ethical one. I've been a huge advocate of animal rights and welfare for a long time, and then it just finally, that switch just finally trips, that you feel kind of hypocritical eating meat and other animal-based foods when you're doing all this work and volunteering and such for animal rights and welfare. So, like a lot of people, I was stuck with the idea that is so prevalent in the fitness industry that you have to have heavy animal-based, protein foods, that you've got to take in a lot of protein, whey protein and things like that, as well as eat a lot of meat in order to gain strength and gain muscle. And that was something that I always had a hard time with because I wasn't well educated and I didn't take the time to research or educate myself and learn from some of the other vegan and plant-based athletes that are out there. So I decided I was going to cut out meat, and eventually that led to fish and dairy, and eggs and things like that. And I finally, starting in about April of 2010, I think is when I stopped eating meat, and then started transitioning from that point till it was New Year's Eve 2012. So it was December 31st, 2012 is when I made the decision that I was going to go totally plant-based and adopt a vegan diet. And honestly, in hindsight, it really wasn't that tough for me. It was actually pretty easy. I think people have been kind of programmed to think that it's so hard to follow a vegan diet. There's so many myths out there. People tell you, that it's too hard, it's too expensive. You have to be really good at math because you've got to figure out how many grams of protein you need and all this crap. And honestly, like a good friend of mine who's a registered dietitian, he told me as long as you're eating enough calories to sustain your activity and the bulk of those calories are coming from whole plant-based foods, you're not going to be protein deficient. And just to make sure, I went ahead and I tracked my macros, because that's the cool thing to do nowadays. Everybody's all about tracking the macros. So I went ahead and I did that for about 3 or 4 days, and what I found was on days that I wasn't consuming any supplemental protein, which I'll get to in a minute, but on the days I wasn't even taking like a protein drink or anything like that, I was still getting more than what was required for a heavy strength training athlete. And the recommendations that I've followed are 1 to 1.5 times your body weight in kilograms is how many grams of protein you should consume a day. So I was getting real close to about 100 grams a day just from whole foods. And then on the days that I train, I usually have a protein drink after my training session. It's usually just 1 scoop of whatever plant-based protein I'm trying. I'm a big fan of many different ones. Warrior Force, Vega, Plant Fusion are some of the ones that I've used. I found Sprouts Farmers Market. They've got a pretty good vegan blend. So I like to try a lot of different ones that are out there so I can provide some feedback for people that inquire about it. But on the days that I take that drink after I train, that's an extra like 20 grams of protein. So no problem hitting all my protein requirements from a whole food plant-based diet, based on when I tracked my macros. So again, the reason that I went vegetarian and then vegan and started making this transition was because I am a big supporter of animal rights and welfare. But what I found was that my health made a dramatic improvement, made a dramatic change by switching to a plant-based diet. And when I started to go, when I switched, I stopped eating meat and I started eating, a vegetarian diet plus, eggs and dairy or whatever. I still wasn't eating a lot of greens. I wasn't eating a lot of fresh, raw, whole fruits and vegetables and things like that. I was not eating meat, but I was still kind of eating some junk and stuff like that. So even though I was feeling a little bit better and I dropped a little bit of weight, I still knew that I needed to make some improvements. So I've been doing some research on various different, vegan athletes and vegetarian athletes, and I started adopting more fresh, raw, whole fruits and vegetables in my diet, some more cooked vegetables and things like that. I even experimented with a raw vegan diet for a while, and actually responded very well to that. And I still continue to eat a predominantly raw diet. I do a lot of green smoothies. I do some fresh pressed green, fruit and vegetable juices. I eat a lot of fresh raw fruit, some nuts and seeds. I try to eat salads whenever I can, and then usually some cooked or steamed vegetables. And then I eat various other plant-based foods on top of that. But by incorporating more green leafy vegetables, by incorporating more fresh raw fruits and veggies into my diet, and nuts and seeds and things like that, I really started feeling better. And that was when my body composition started changing dramatically. And after following a predominantly raw vegan diet for about 4 months, I had dropped about 50 pounds of body fat. So when I look at how my health turned around as a result of adopting this way of eating, it was pretty dramatic. So to give you an idea of what I was able to accomplish by switching to this type of diet, starting out, my body weight was roughly between 220 and 230 pounds. After 4 months on this, I guess you would call it a high raw vegan diet, because I was eating probably a little bit more than 50 to 75% of my calories from fresh, raw, whole foods, and then the rest of my nutrition came from things like beans and legumes, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, some different types of sprouted grain breads or wraps, things like that. That was pretty much the bulk of what I was eating. So my body weight went from 220 to 230 was the range, down to the lowest was about 178, and the highest was about 182. So I stayed right around 180, and this was after about 4 months on this type of diet. A note about the training: I'd actually stopped training really hard. I wasn't training as intense as I was when I was competing in powerlifting back in 04, 05, 06, 07, in those years. I was still doing a little bit of weightlifting, but it certainly wasn't high intensity. It was a little bit more volume based. Frequency wasn't as great. I think I was training about 3 days a week with weights, but I did adopt some different types of exercise. I had started studying Tai Chi Chuan, which is it's an internal Chinese martial art. I started practicing Qigong and meditation, and I started focusing a little bit more on stretching and mobility and just overall tissue health. So I was actually getting a lot more mobile, a lot more flexible as I was losing this weight, and actually just feeling a lot better. So again, my body weight dropped from about 220, 230 down to about 178 to 182. My blood pressure would range anywhere from about 125 over 85 up to about 135 over 90. And when I went for my physical after 4 months on a high raw plant-based diet, it was ranging between 102 over 67 and 112 over 72. So huge drop in my blood pressure. My total cholesterol was right about 220 prior to going plant-based. It had dropped down to 151 at this physical after being plant-based for 4 months. My HDL, the healthy cholesterol, went from 41 up to 43, and my LDL went from 130 down to 95. My triglycerides had ranged anywhere from 135 to 300 at the highest. They were down to 65 after this 4 months of following a high raw plant-based diet. So as you can see, the changes were pretty dramatic. My doctor was pretty blown away, because this is the first time I'd ever been in for a physical, and everything checked out perfectly. In addition to the labs, he checked all my vitamins, all my minerals, my testosterone and everything. Everything was in the desirable ranges. Nothing was outside of the limits, and this was the first time everything checked out perfectly. And his advice was keep doing what you're doing. So when I hear people say it's hard to be healthy on a plant-based diet, it's hard to gain muscle, to gain strength and all this stuff, it's just, for lack of a better term, it's crap. Because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a dietitian. I figured this stuff out on my own, and if I was able to do it and improve my health, improved my lean body composition, and my strength is, I'm getting my strength back now that I'm back into lifting a little bit heavier, doing more intensive strength training. My strength's starting to come back, and my goal is to exceed my best lifts from when I was heavier, 220, 230, at a lighter body weight, being 100% plant-based. But my strength's starting to come back, and I've improved my body composition, my mobility, my flexibility, and other facets that I struggled with prior to this. So everything's working out great for me, and like I said, I've been totally vegan for a little over 2.5 years now, and I started making that transition in April of 2010. So it's not as long as some of my friends and some of my colleagues who've been doing it a little bit longer, but every year's getting better. I just turned 40 about a week or so ago, and honestly, I feel better now than when I was 30, and I really attribute it to a much cleaner, healthier, more well-balanced lifestyle. So, some of the myths that we tend to hear when talking about vegan diets or plant-based diets is that, you're not getting enough protein, or you're not getting complete proteins, which those myths have all been crushed. I've talked to registered dietitians about this, and everything that I've heard from the research that I've done and from the people that I've talked to, you can get all the amino acids that you need as long as you're consuming a wide variety of whole plant-based foods. And like I said, as far as getting the necessary macronutrients, I had no problem doing it even without supplemental protein. And one of my clients made a huge change on a 100% whole food plant-based diet. We'll talk about that in a second. You hear that you don't get enough nutrients and stuff like that, but whole raw plant-based foods are full of micronutrients, full of vitamins and minerals and enzymes. And I think people on omnivorous diets tend to not eat enough of the fresh raw fruits and vegetables, and those are great sources of the vitamins and the minerals and the micronutrients and such. You hear this thing about B12, you're not getting any B12. Well, I know tons of omnivores who have been recommended by their doctors to get B12 shots. So if they're eating meat and they're not getting B12 and they're having to get shots, I don't think this is a problem that is just for people on plant-based diets only. I think it can be for anybody. Again, I don't quite know or understand the science behind it, but I just take a B12 supplement every day, and it hasn't been an issue. My B12 has never been low every time I've had a physical, so it's nothing that I've really been worried about. So a lot of these myths that you hear, they're just really excuses, and honestly, I think a lot of it is people just don't want to admit that you don't need to eat meat to be healthy, to be strong, to be athletic, because they might not want to come to terms with the fact that they might not want to face those issues, regarding animal welfare as well. So I don't know personally, why so many people have a hesitation or they freak out when you start talking about vegan diets and things like that. But my health hasn't suffered. If anything, I feel better. And I know plenty of people who have done exceptionally well on a plant-based diet. And if you just look at, some of the people out there that are following 100% plant-based diets, who are vegans, who do compete in sports at high levels. You've got an NFL football player who's a lineman named David Carter. They call him the 300-pound vegan. This guy's able to maintain tons of body mass eating a plant-based diet. You've got the German strongman, Patrick Baboumian, who had a Guinness World Record in the strongman yoke lift and carry. I think it was 555 kilos, somewhere around 1,233 pounds. He did that after being vegan for about 2 years and vegetarian for about, I think, 6 or 7 years prior. I believe he went vegetarian in 2005, and then in 2011 he switched to a 100% vegan diet. At that point, if I remember correctly, he said he was just consuming whey protein. That was the only non-vegan thing that he was consuming, and he cut that out in 2011 and became totally vegan. So you hear these people on the internet just bashing people like Patrick, saying, well, he built his body on animal-based foods, now he's just maintaining it with a plant-based diet. If the guy's been vegetarian for 7-8 years and vegan for the last 4 years or so, with the rate that the body's cells turn over, the body rebuilds itself, he is rebuilding and regenerating his tissue on a 100% plant-based diet. So I don't buy that argument. I think, honestly, it's a bunch of crap. You've got tons of bodybuilders, powerlifters. Just go to plantbuilt.com or plantbuilt.org. I can't remember the actual domain of the Team Plant Built website, but you'll see over 40 athletes in disciplines like bodybuilding and physique competition, powerlifting, CrossFit, and kettlebell sport, who are all vegans who do really, really well at these events. In fact, this year at the Plant Built, at the 2015 Plant Built event down at the Naturally Fit Games in Austin, Texas, our CrossFitters won the female open first place division, the male open first place division, and in the couples division, they got second place. And I think we had either one or two more girls place in the top 10 and or one or two more guys place in the top 10. So you're talking about a sport that is very competitive and that's also very paleo dominant, and some vegan athletes went there this year and did really, really well. The bodybuilders did really well, the powerlifters did really well. Everybody is proving day in and day out that you can do this stuff following a plant-based diet. So I don't buy any of these ideas that you can't get strong, you can't build muscle, you can't perform optimally as an athlete following a vegan diet. And it's really not that hard. You just have to make sure that you're consuming enough calories and that you're getting a wide variety of whole plant-based foods, which even for somebody on an omnivorous diet is not a bad idea. They should be rounding out their diet with a lot of fruit and vegetable and different types of plant-based items as well. So I kind of want to wrap up this episode talking about a really cool project that I got to do with somebody who contacted me. Give you a little backstory. I started in, I think it was 2012 or 2013, I started a project called PlantBased Performance. Basically what it is, it's a way for me to continually give back to various animal welfare organizations. I created a separate website for it. It's plantbasedperformance.org. And basically the first thing that I did was created a book where I got, I think it was 18 or 19 other vegan athletes, health and fitness professionals, and activists to contribute articles. And the articles make up the content of the book. And the book is called A Compassionate Approach to Health and Fitness. And it features people like Mac Danzig, the former UFC fighter, Mike Mahler, who's a great trainer and a hormone optimization specialist. He's a very strong guy, also runs a great podcast called the Live Life Aggressively podcast. He's featured in the book. A great trainer from the UK, Sabina Scala, is featured in the book. Amy Dumas, who was, you might know her from professional wrestling. She was the Lita in the WWE. She's featured in the book, and many other athletes. Juliana Hever, the plant-based dietitian, contributed some articles. Matt Frazier from No Meat Athlete contributed articles. So we've got some great people who've contributed content to this book, so you can read about their personal stories and such. Well, one of the people that contributed to the book is a hip-hop artist. His name's Stic.Man. He's one of the two people in the duo Dead Prez, and he contributed an article to the book. And after we put the book together, I'd sent him an email thanking him for being part of the group and for his contribution. And he said to me that he had a goal. He's a naturally lean guy, and he's a big-time distance runner, and he was always looking to put on a little bit more body mass, particularly in the upper body, the arms, the chest, the back, to kind of fill out a little bit. And he had asked me if I thought it was something that could be done on a whole food plant-based diet with no supplements, no powders, no pills. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we scheduled time to get together here at my training center. He came up, we sat down, really cool guy. We talked for about a half hour to an hour that day, and we kind of mapped out a plan, and we decided to start a project. He wanted to accomplish a 20-pound mass gain in 4 months. I told him I thought that we could probably get there a little bit sooner. So we set up a plan. He started doing personal training with me. And his wife, Afya, she is a holistic nutritionist, and she's a vegan herself, and she's authored a bunch of different cookbooks and things like that. So she was kind of the whiz in the kitchen and kind of handled his plant-based nutrition plan. Now, like I said before, he wanted to do this without any powders, any pills, no supplements of any kind. He wanted to do it strictly with whole plant-based foods. And he, with strength training and keeping up his long distance running, which is another that's kind of a no-no when you're trying to build mass. You always hear don't do distance running, don't do low intensity cardio and things because it makes the muscle gains harder. So we went ahead and we dove into this project and we accomplished the 20-pound gain in way under 4 months. We did it in about 2.5 months. And then, because he did put on a little bit of body fat, I think his body fat went up 1 percentage point, so it wasn't a huge gain, but he did smooth out a little bit with all this new mass. We went ahead and he started doing kind of a lean bulk or a cutting phase where he started trimming up body fat. And when it was all said and done, he ended up maintaining about 13 pounds of this 20 that he put on, and he had lowered his body fat from about 9.5% when he started down to about 7.5%. So his body fat jumped up to about 10% when he had finished his 20-pound gain. But then after cutting with all this new mass, his body fat was actually 2 percentage points lower than where he started at, and he maintained about 13 pounds of this new lean muscle mass he built. All while following a 100% whole food plant-based diet, and all while keeping in long distance running about 2 or 3 times a week. So he proved that you can get all the nutrients the body requires for building mass, for building strength, and fueling athletic performance by eating a whole food plant-based diet. Now there are certain items and things like that make it easy, and I want to give a big shout out to Beyond Meat. Beyond Meat has been a big supporter of Team Plant Built this year, and I got to tell you, if you have not tried their beast burgers yet, these things are amazing. 23 grams of protein per burger, and the same amount of iron as a regular beef burger, and I think like half the fat. So the nutrient profile is spectacular. So there are some really awesome plant-based foods out there that make being on a vegan diet so much easier. I talked to people who went vegan in the early 80s and stuff like that, and it was so much harder back then because they were so limited on what you could get at the store, and they really didn't have many options and things. Now it's so easy to eat a whole food plant-based diet, as well as find these different types of veggie burgers and things that you would normally have if you're following an omnivorous diet that are animal-based protein sources. You can buy vegetable-based sources now. There's various types of non-dairy cheeses. There's all kinds of different burgers and hot dogs and things like that. So stuff that might not even be considered super healthy, you've even got those snack foods or cheat foods or things like that. There's vegan cheesecakes and just all kinds of different desserts and really cool things out there. So it's so easy to transition to a plant-based diet nowadays. It's not even funny. But going back to the project that we did with Stic, we decided that we wanted to turn this into something more than a personal training thing that he and I and his wife all did together. So what we did is the three of us took everything that we experienced together during his transition, and we turned it into a book, and we called it Eat Plants, Lift Iron. So we've recently published a book that documents, it's 1/3 his narrative, 1/3 a nutrition section that features all the recipes that Afya made for him and the nutrition plan he followed, and then 1/3 that I wrote that discusses the training, various training methodologies and things like that. But we also made it as an educational tool for people who maybe want to put on some lean tissue and things following a plant-based diet. So it's a very inspiring read. It's a motivational book, and there's a ton of info in there. And our good friend Tori, the vegan Dread Washington, who's a pro natural bodybuilder, he wrote the foreword to the book. So he's another fantastic person to follow if you want to see what a vegan athlete can do. Tori's actually been vegetarian since birth and vegan for about the last 16 or 18 years, and the guy's built a phenomenal physique. I think he holds 4 or 5 different pro cards, 4 or 5 different natural bodybuilding divisions. The guy's just done amazingly well in bodybuilding competition. So he wrote the foreword to the book. So it's a very informative book, and I'll put some links down in the notes under this video, so you can, if you want to check out the book or learn more about it. But basically, I just wanted to use this episode to talk about vegan diets, plant-based diets, and how easy it is to adopt that type of nutrition plan and continue to excel athletically, to gain muscle, to gain strength. There's plenty of people out there doing it. There's more and more you're starting to see, more research and even more science get put behind it as well. So it's a topic that still blows me away that people are even debating it on the internet. But it's possible. It's very easy to do, And in hindsight, it shouldn't have taken me the few years it did to transition from a vegetarian to a vegan diet. It really is not that hard to follow. And it's honestly, I feel it's one of the best things that I did for my health and just my overall fitness and well-being. So hopefully you get some information or get some inspiration from this episode. If you've got any questions or you've been maybe teetering with maybe wanting to try some plant-based foods or maybe transition to that type of diet or lifestyle, there's tons of great resources. So leave me questions in the comments or email me privately. All my links I'll put down in the down underneath the video and the notes. And if it's something you're thinking about, good luck. I wish you the best. And as always, until next time, stay strong and healthy.